Hi there, it's me, Bob, again. Thanks for coming back to my site. I just watched an amazing video on something that I have been doing research on for many years now. It's got my heart ticking a little bit, and I'm going to show you the video after I finish talking. I'll add it on to the end of this moment here. But it has to do with the Copper Scroll. If you're a member of my site or subscriber, or you receive my emails, or if you've been to my website, Macron is the Antichrist.info, you know that I've been preaching on the Copper Scroll for many years now. I think it's one of the most important items that a born again Christian can be involved in who's interested in Bible prophecy. The Copper Scroll is just an incredible story. If you're interested in Indiana Jones and movies like that, this is the real thing, and it's just a fascinating subject. But I've been talking about and preaching, if you will, that in my opinion, the Copper Scroll, which talks about the treasure from King Solomon's day, the gold, the silver, the Ark of the Covenant, and all the vestments. They know where it's buried. It's in a cave. They've known for years now, which this video that you'll see talks about that. And I've been telling people that, in my opinion, that I feel that after Psalm 83, when Israel has access to Jordan and this particular cave, which right now is under Jordanian control, because of Psalm 83, they will get back that control. And I believe that the Antichrist, I've always said this, that the Antichrist will, and his people will be responsible for digging up the treasure and perhaps one day riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, perhaps bringing all of the gold and silver and gems and the Ark of the Covenant and presenting it to the Sanhedrin and instantly being coronated as the Messiah. Because anybody that brings that Ark of the Covenant into Israel will be nominated for the Messiah. This particular video that I want to share with you is from a man named Nelson Waters, I think. I'm not keen on everything that he says and he preaches, but he is a fan of the Copper Scroll, so that makes him a fan of mine. And he will discuss pretty much all of the things that I've been talking about for a few years. And as I said on other things, the UN, it's sort of an affirmation of the things that I've been talking about. So, of course, it excites me. But he'll tell you more, and you'll see more about the Copper Scroll. And it's something that you really need to get interested in. It's critical to the tribulation period. And if you have any inquiries about what I've been talking about, you can go into my website, macronistheantichrist.info, look at some of the backstories about the Ark of the Covenant. Behind me is a picture that I've used many times. This is a artist rendition of what's in that cave that the Antichrist will dig up. And I'll stop talking and I'll share that video with you. Okay?
If we knew where Jeremiah, Zechariah, and Haggai, the Old Testament prophets from the Bible, hid the Ark of the Covenant and the treasures of Solomon's temple, why haven't we been able to dig them up? If we had them, it would sure accelerate the building of the third temple, wouldn't it? You'll be shocked to hear this, but the book of Daniel tells us about who it is that ultimately unearths them and why. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and today we have a really fascinating teaching for you about the future of the Third Temple that I would assume you have probably never heard before in its entirety. Now, all this centers around one of the Dead Sea Scrolls found 75 years ago, known as the Copper Scroll. It was located in the Qumran area in cave number 3. The French expedition there found the cave after clearing away some rock and dirt that had hid the entry. In this cave, they found 40 jars with priceless manuscripts written prior to the time of Jesus. We call these the Dead Sea Scrolls. In this particular cave were the books of Lamentations, Psalms, Ezekiel. Imagine having those. On the last day of their expedition, though, they noticed a large limestone rock that had collapsed from the ceiling and seemed to hide a chamber behind it, a secret chamber. Carefully chipping through this rock, they found 2 scrolls, only 2, made out of copper, with that kind of distinct patina that copper has, like the Statue of Liberty. Self-taught archaeologist Jim Barfield translated the scroll, and he explains in an interview with Blazing Press why it was written on copper.
Yeah, and they wanted it to last millennium, 2 millennium. And certainly they wanted it to last 70 years.
So they expected this scroll to last a long time, and it has. Right now, the scroll is located in the country of Jordan, because when the original dig of Cave 3 was done, Jordan was occupying that land, so they own the scroll. What was written on the copper scroll? It's a map of sorts to the materials that were in Solomon's temple.
Which, let me tell the people, these items that they buried were temple artifacts, temple vessels, ingots of gold and silver, and gems for the rebuilding of the temple.
Items of unbelievable value historically, spiritually, and of course, even monetarily. There are 57 separate locations of this spiritual treasure listed on the scroll, with directions how to find them. One of these sites, site number 4 alone, supposedly had 900 talents of gold. You remember hearing about talents of gold in Jesus' parable of the talents. A single talent is 75 pounds. 900 of them is 500 pounds of gold in just one site. What would that be worth in American dollars? Today, the price of gold is a little bit more than $2,400 an ounce. There's 12 troy ounces in a pound of gold. So today, that one site alone is worth $2 billion. There are 56 other sites just like it on the Copper Scroll. But of course, the physical value of the gold is not what makes this valuable. It's what it was used for. The walls inside the temple were paneled with gold. Yep, they used the gold to create what they called the Gleaning room. Let's let Jim Barfield describe this for us.
Inside of the tabernacle and inside of every temple that was built, the walls of the temple were completely coated in polished gold. So if you got a mirror, then they were like mirrors. If you got golden mirrors inside of that chamber and you light a menorah, it's going to turn into a gleaming chamber. But more importantly, if the Shekinah glory is lighting up inside of the Holy of Holies, oh my goodness, do you ever have a gleaming chamber?
In addition to those 57 sites, there is a cave with even more important treasures than that. Listen to Chris Knight, a partner of Barfield's, in an interview with Standing with Zion, as he describes what might be in that cave.
There's mentioned the ephod, like in location 3. We also see that there's garments that are mentioned in location 57. It calls it the wealth of the house, and even says there's another document sealed in the entrance of a cave that has another inventory. And that scroll is probably an addition to the copper scroll that was found in cave 52. So there's probably another copper scroll that continues the inventory, that continues the wealth of the house. And in that is the Ark of the Covenant, the Tabernacle of Moses, all the wealth of the house, the gold from Egypt.
I want you all to pay attention to what he just said, the gold from Egypt. This is from the book of Daniel, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes.
The things that were kept stored and were kept precious, that were hidden during Babylonian times. You find it in Second Maccabees and Baruch and Josiah and Mech-Hamelech, the Treaty of the Vessels. When you begin to pull these historical documents together, you begin to potentially see what's there. And it even says in Second Maccabees that these things will come out after the gathering. They'll be found during the time of mercy. And so 1947 potentially was the beginning of the gathering.
So how should Christians like you and me view these things? Let's listen to Barfield as he describes how a rabbi reacted when he learned about what was on the copper scroll.
I had a very prominent rabbi in Israel. He saw my research and he said, Mr. Barfield, he said, do you know what this means to my people? And I told him, yes, I know what it means. It means the same thing to my people. And he said, what you have found is the dowry for the coming bride. And it floored me that a rabbi would say something like that. But it makes so much sense whenever
now,
I
what
got.
did he mean? What did he mean by that in terms of, because we would take it as Jesus' return. How did he interpret that?
He meant for the coming king, the Messiah, that will rule and reign. It would be the dowry, the money that would be needed, like with any bride, that they would be able to build their home. They would be able to buy the furnishings that they needed. And that's what he was implying. When he wasn't implying, he was telling me that.
And on top of all of that, on top of all those treasures, are the 2 lost scrolls of Haggai the prophet. The Essenes, who buried the Dead Sea Scrolls, believed the lost scrolls of Haggai would be of great value in the end times, so they buried them also at this site. Can you imagine having those messages from God? And I think we will in a very short time. Now, in a minute, I'm going to answer the question for you, why aren't they digging these up right now? And who is it that is probably going to dig them up in the future? Before we get to that, you guys have made a request that I make myself available to answer some questions for you in a watch party where it's just me and you. And we're going to do that on Saturday, August 31st at 2 p.m. And the rules are the same as we had before. If you want to attend, there's a link down in the description to this video where you'll be able to register for that event because it's off-site. And of course, as always, it's free. There's no charge. And on that site, we can talk about anything we want without censorship. And we'll be happy to answer your question, as many as we can, concentrating mostly on the events that are happening in the world right now. But now let's get back to the study. Before we answer why they aren't digging them up, a logical question is, well, how are you really sure that those things are there? We're saying this is the greatest treasure on earth, but do we know where it is? We do, actually within inches. Again, listen to Barfield as he describes the ground-penetrating radar he used on this site.
And Moshe Feiglin, who was the deputy speaker of the Knesset at that time, he and I talked. We had a meeting in New York City, and he really liked what I was telling him. And he was angry that the Israelis weren't letting me to excavate to get these things out of the ground. Well, he joined me at Qumran, me and Chris, my wife, my son, and some of the other guys, Matt Kaiser, a good buddy of mine. We were at Qumran, and under his authority, we scanned Qumran with this really powerful metal detector. That's where we scanned. And what you look for is mounds. And look at this. Look at that, guys. That's just unbelievable.
Wow.
How much is there. This is actually a strip of silver that was buried. Number 2, that there's gemstones. Gemstones do not show up on a metal detector. So there was a lot more gemstones in this area as well. But that is a scan. This is a scan. This is a report that I sent to Moshe Feiglin, the deputy speaker of the Knesset. This is the big courtyard. And over here, this big peak here, I believe that is the 900 talents. I only walked past it. I didn't go over it. We just clipped the side of it as we're scanning the whole
Wow.
courtyard.
Now,
So-
what about those things down there that look like boxes? They actually look like a box.
Well, the green is non-ferrous metals, so you could be right. Those two could be boxes sitting side by side, because all of this, according to the location, is supposed to be vessels from the temple.
So now you're saying, after all this type of scientific analysis, who could deny that these things are there? And the authorities in Israel, they don't deny it. The heads of the antiquities departments are in full agreement. So why aren't they digging right now? Well, because the government of Israel is not permitting them to dig these things out of the ground. Think about the scroll itself. It's in a museum in Jordan. It's not in Israel. And the reason is, at that time, it was found in Qumran, which belonged to Jordan. Jordan possessed that land at that time. Some people refer to this area as the West Bank because, as we said, at the time it was occupied by Jordan. And I think that's one of the reasons why there is so much governmental opposition from the Israeli government to the dig. It's a question of ownership. Anything that's found archaeologically, even if it clearly belongs to the Jewish people, because it's found in an area that is disputed territory, whatever is found will be disputed also. This is especially true if they find huge amounts of gold and silver. Could you imagine someone taking control of these items and melting them down to cash them in? There is also the issue of what they signify. They would prove that there was a Jewish temple on the Temple Mount. Internationally, this would be a problem. You might say, how could anyone claim something that so obviously belongs to Israel? A few years ago, there was a case where the USA's administration gave an archaeological find to these guys. It was a spoon that was found in Israel and was over 2,000 years old. It certainly did not belong to these guys, but they gave it to them anyway. Imagine if that was the Ark of the Covenant and the people who got it just melted it down. For this reason, right now, the Israeli government have the dig site under armed guard. So now we know the greatest treasure on earth is sitting there, and we know where it is. However, we aren't the only ones who know, which brings us to the person who eventually digs these things up. Remember, I mentioned to remember the gold of Egypt. Why was the gold of Egypt kept with the other temple treasures? Where did ancient Israel get the gold to make the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, the table of showbread? They made these things while they were still wandering in the desert for 40 years. All of these items were made out of the gold and silver of Egypt. If you remember, on the day of the Exodus, Moses told the Israelites to ask the Egyptians for their gold. We read this in Exodus 12:35-36. The people of Israel have also done as Moses told them, for they had asked the Egyptians for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so they let them have what they asked, and thus they plundered the Egyptians. This gold was later used to make the holy objects and the polished gold walls of the tabernacle. How else would former Hebrew slaves who had nothing get that quantity of gold? So when we read about the gold of Egypt, that is what the Bible means. This brings us to a very misunderstood passage. Let's look at the passage in Daniel 11:43. He, speaking of the Antichrist, shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and silver and all the precious things of Egypt. So this could be that the Antichrist becomes the ruler of the temple treasures, including the Ark of the Covenant. We have several more reasons to believe that's true. One reason is what we just talked about. If the treasures still haven't been unearthed at that point when the Antichrist comes to power, he's going to control that land all around Israel, around the Dead Sea, where these things are located, and he'll have them dug up. Or conversely, if they had already been dug up, He's going to take control of them when he controls the temple. In 2 Thessalonians 2:4, we know he takes his seat in the temple and declares himself to be God, which is reason 3 to suspect this happens. He takes his seat. What kind of throne is he going to sit on? What was God's throne on earth? 1 Samuel 4:4, we read, "So the people sent to Shiloh and brought from there the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim." So the ark of the covenant is God's throne on earth. He sits above the wings of a cherubim. Wouldn't it be just like Satan to have his man Antichrist sit on the ark when he declares himself to be God? And then live, because people can't touch the ark and live. But maybe the Antichrist will live, and he'll say, "See, I lived. I'm God." And like it says in Daniel 9:27, on the wings of abomination will come one who makes desolate. Is this a reference to the cherubim wings on the Ark of the Covenant? Maybe so. Then finally, the Muslim scriptures themselves refer to this even more clearly. Now granted, they're not from God, they're not God-inspired, but they are likely Satan-inspired. In those scriptures, the Muslim savior, the Mahdi, is called the rightly guided one. According to these writings, he is guided to find the Ark of the Covenant. That is somewhat sad. However, these treasures are ultimately the dowry of the bride, as the rabbi told Barfield. Jesus will cleanse the temple and will use all these items in the millennial kingdom. But this teaching about the temple treasures and the copper scroll is just scratching the surface of what we can learn from Qumran and the Essenes who lived there. Did you know Qumran was built as a direct miniature reflection of the city of Jerusalem in the days of Jeremiah? Click right here to find out if this truly was the home of the prophets at that time and the priests of Melchizedek. If that video isn't out yet, click over here for another eye-opening video. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.